Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
About 250 years ago, my hero, Ben Franklin, who was what I call America's first chief marketing officer, said, "We are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid." And remaining stupid is not just the domain of individuals. Brands can do that too, ignoring the conversations happening in and around their product or service, especially the ones that are happening on social media channels. On Twitter, for example, among the 500 or so million tweets a day, several million mention brands. In fact, 80% of Twitter users mention a brand in a tweet at least once. So social listening, and I've talked about this on the show, can provide insights for product development, messaging, target engagement, geographic and demographic trends, customer service issues, and a lot more. And that's why social media analytics is a $2.7 billion industry this year and is expected to be over $9 billion in 5 years. So one of the leaders in social media analytics is Silicon Valley-based NetBase, who happens to be here in New York with me in person. And fortunately for you, Renegade Thinkers, their CMO, Paige is on the show today. Welcome, Paige.
Thanks, Drew. Glad to be here.
So you've been in marketing for 20 plus years, working at such brands as CipherCloud, SAP, Ariba, and E-Trade. This must be a really exciting time to be at NetBase, given the growth of the industry.
It very much is. I mean, you look at social media analytics and, from a social media perspective, what's the first thing we do every day? Possibly check Facebook, check Instagram, check anything else, right? And knowing what's going on in the world as well as what's going on with your family and your personal life. So
you have a camera in my bedroom, don't you? Because that's almost exactly what I do. I sort of do a quick, I wake up, I either hit the snooze button or I open up my social channels just to do a quick check, just to see if there's any disaster out there or an opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, it's before you check your email. Right, it's before you check your voicemail, you check social media.
Yeah, that's there's some sort of something mentally wrong with that, but we won't pass any judgment, right?
Well, I think from my perspective, it's a good thing, right?
Right. Well, okay.
The more you check social media, the better.
So there are a few of my listeners who may not exactly know what social listening and social analytics really are. Can you sort of provide a basic overview of what we're talking about here?
What we're talking about is there's basically tens of millions of different sites out there, including the major channels that you are familiar with, which be it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Tumblr, Google+, etc. But there's literally tens of millions of other sites which people are discussing in forums or in product review sites as to what they're thinking, what their feedback is, information sharing, knowledge sharing, video and or photo sharing around their experiences. And so what we do is we aggregate all that data, all the public data that's available, and we provide analysis and tools that brands and or agencies can analyze that data and generate insights.
So there are a lot of practical benefits. I know we do a lot of social listening for our clients, but can you sort of highlight a couple of the key sort of things that the hot buttons right now that sort of get marketers excited about social listening?
Yeah, I think a number of different things. I think one is new campaigns. I want to target this audience. A lot of people are targeting millennials and or targeting other audiences that are demographically focused towards their products, and understanding what they're thinking, not only about their potential product offering, but also other products that may be in the market that are similar. Crisis management is a big issue right now, and on social, things can spiral out of control very, very quickly, whether it's tied to your specific brand or tangentially tied to your industry, or potentially even a competitor in which you could get wrapped up in. As well as with respect to new campaigns associated with new products, but also new campaigns that are seasonal. new things that we're offering during the holiday season that's coming up? How can we target our audience more specifically?
Well, it's funny, or sad actually, and I probably told this story on a couple of other episodes, but we had a couple of clients several years ago for whom we were doing social, and they were both big national brands, and they both had new campaign spokespeople. This was in about a 3-month period, and we knew that these campaigns were dead within 24 hours because of social media listening. And unfortunately for those brands, because these were big brands, they couldn't change those campaigns for 6 months to 9 months. It was really very sad. And I felt like it was preventable, but that's I suspect, a different conversation.
Yeah, we've had a number of customers of ours that use NetBase just in the past holiday season, going back to November, December of last year, who used our social listening solution to quickly be able to pivot on the ads that they were running. One was a large appliance company who was pushing some new features on their appliance, and they realized it wasn't working. But when they changed it to recipes that you could actually make with their appliance, recipes that were healthy as well as seasonal, all of a sudden interest grew. Another company that's well known for its dietary promotions around helping people lose weight, during the new year, was also pushing their focus with respect to, that within a large person, there's a thin person trying to get out, and it reacted very negatively. And they didn't realize they could have realized sooner if they would have used social listening to be able to respond to that.
Interesting. So the first example I would put into the category of they actually created content that had genuine value for the consumer, and that value ended up translating into more customer interest. That's a sort of, to me, core insight to all marketing. If you can create content that has value, right? That's sort of one.
I think it also enables that, the first one with the recipe one, it enables that personal connection. So rather than thinking at it from the brand's perspective, these are my products and this is what they can do, looking at it from the consumer perspective or the buyer perspective, this is what they can do with it.
Imagine for a moment, there's a lot of noise out there. Are these the campaigns that we're talking about? Are these digital campaigns? Because it's very hard, for example, to produce a television commercial and then suddenly replace that with another television commercial. I'm imagining that these circumstances were digital campaigns that were easily swapped out with new improved versions.
Yes, these are all digital campaigns.
Okay. So we had the appliance maker who figured out that they could do better recipes. We found the diet solution company that was actually sort of off with their message and needed to sort of to really pivot because the feedback was negative. Is there another specific great example when you hold up that sort of this was transformational or this was huge in terms of the way that the brand was able to take some social listening information and use it in a very creative and sort of cut through way?
I think there's so many examples of that.
Okay, then we're going to go through them, a few of them. Well, let's start with one really great one.
Okay, a really good one. It was from last year when Taco Bell introduced their breakfast. All right, the first time in their history that they had breakfast. And really, they use social really to reach out to their advocates, their listeners, to understand the items that would go on their menu and how they would introduce breakfast. And using actually one of the recommendations that came out of this was the actually introduction of a Taco Bell application, was specifically focused initially on breakfast and then the entire menu. But they use social as their focus group, and very, very successfully before they introduced it to the rest of their consumers.
I think that's so interesting, and it's there's so much good potential feedback from social listening. One is just sort of hearing the general conversation. I know one of the things, McDonald's is another brand that used social listening when they were launching their breakfast. People, not their breakfast, but the all-day breakfast. They literally thousands of people had said, "Hey, breakfast all day, please." Right. And they went back and actually tweeted responses. They partnered with Twitter and they tweeted responses to like 11,000 people saying, oh, by the way, we have all day breakfast. So there's a lot of good sort of social listening to using it as a means of sort of engaging your core users.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're focusing, when you think about social listening, just a caveat here, actually a really important one is most brands, most companies have 3 different channels. They have their own channel, which is what you were just talking about. McDonald's pushing out all their content and measuring engagement to that content. There's partnered content, which is people that you paid for in some way to advocate on your behalf. And then there's what we call earned content, which is from our perspective and from social listening perspective, is the most valuable. This is where people are talking about your brand or talking about characteristics of your product that you think are interesting and are applicable. And that's where you get the real insights.
Okay. So I want to really dive in on that. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will be talking about more examples of brands really using social listening to gain competitive advantage. Hey, it's Drew. I have a question for you, the audience. How good is your content? We all believe in content marketing, but is your content good enough for you to share it with the CEO and want him to share it with his peers? Is it good enough for your salespeople to share with their prospects? Heck, is it good enough for you to share it with your mom? If the answer to all of those questions was no, well, it's not that good, and you're also celebrating things like National Donut Day, it's probably a good idea to do a content audit. And I know just the person to help you out with that. Text content audit to 917-679-8852. That's actually my cell phone. And we can talk about how to get your content to be world class and do all the things that you know it should be able to do. So you can text content audit to 917-679-8852. And let's figure out together how to get your content to cut through. Okay, we're back. My guest is Paige Leidig, CMO of NetBase, and we've been talking about social listening. And I want to sort of we'll take a step back for a minute and just talk about what is the state of the art right now for social listening and how brands are really leveraging it to great success.
Well, the state of the art is actually using NetBase, of course.
Wait a second.
Anyone who's serious about social listening uses a tool like NetBase.
Okay.
But it's basically, as I was mentioning earlier, it's about really understanding your earned channel and understanding what's going on with what people that are talking about in your industry or talking about with respect to attributes of your products that are interesting to you, and doing this at all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but also doing it when you're kicking off any type of new campaign, any type of new product launch, any standard brand health checking. It's all done all the time. That's best practices. We have a number of customers, actually dozens of customers, that have what they call war rooms, social media war rooms, where they have a team of folks that are analyzing all the different millions of social media channels out there and looking for mentions of their brand, whether it's in text and or in video and or in imagery, but also any other competitors and any of the characteristics of their products.
It's funny, as you're talking about that, I'm remembering a conversation I had with someone who was in charge of social customer care at Microsoft, and this was before the launch of Windows 10. And what was remarkable about that story to me was that the customer care people said, hey, if you do these 10 things, the number of complaints that we'll have on social channels will drop by, like 60%. So they did those 10 things. And then they went out to beta with it. And then social customer care found another 10 things to fix. And before they launched it, they fixed that. And the result was a product that had a far greater customer satisfaction and far better, sentiment balance than previous releases. So I think the whole use of social listening for new product development, both from the idea standpoint, but also sort of product improvement standpoint, and then making sure that you got there and continuing it.
Right. I mean, look at a perfect example Apple just introduced a whole new line of phones like a month ago. Right. And all the different carriers out there needed to respond and make those phones available. And so what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the inventory of your phones, or you're also focusing on the response to people using those new phones on these new carriers? And we have a customer of ours that really is a leader in customer care, understanding that in this very competitive wireless carrier, portable phone, smartphone business, that customer care is the differentiator. And if you listen first, early on, during, and after, you're going to have a huge positive response from your consumer.
Let's talk more about that case in particular. How do you differentiate with via social listening and try to build that into as a competitive advantage?
Well, as on the front end is staffing your team appropriately. So talking about these war rooms and actually have people that are watching these different channels and making that investment early on in the process, as part of your planning of the launching of the new product or launching of the new service, one. Then two, being able to respond quickly. So this whole 7x24 people actually analyzing the channel, using a sophisticated tool like NetBase to understand the sentiment around what people are talking about. A lot of people today, when they complain, they don't call customer service. They get up on their favorite social channel and they complain. So being able to respond to that basically within seconds, if not minutes. And then being able to provide the right answers. So not only are you having people say, yes, we got your complaint, but they're actually able to provide service over social.
So as you're saying this, I'm imagining when you launch a new product, particularly in mass market, there could be lots and lots of customer comments and customer complaints. Are we using some kind of artificial intelligence to help, or cognitive recognition to help the bigger issues bubble to the top?
Yes, we're using a technology called, you can think of it, I think it would morph into the terminology of artificial intelligence today, but basically it's called natural language processing, NLP. And basically you're sifting through all that data and analyzing and getting this understanding of the context as well as the sentiment, as well as I'd call the passion, how heated is this around the comments that are being stated. And you're doing that over, potentially as many as 199 different languages in real time.
Wow. Okay. And so the idea being that the ones that the sort of the artificial intelligence, if you will, or the natural language processing is sort of finding that one that is, oh my gosh, we got to fix this one because this one is bad. They're really on the scale of anger, they're at a 10. And so the customer, that one bubbles up to the surface as it sort of becomes a priority. It helps you create priority lists.
It creates a very quickly priority list, and chances are there's going to be more than one.
Right. Okay.
There can be hundreds, if not thousands, all at one time.
And then using your tool, that individual can respond. And is there a way for this also, that person to have smart responses and that where we have sort of, what's sort of robotic help, if you will? Or are they sort of that agent? It's up to them to sort of figure out what the answer is.
Well, I think it's within the company. I think they have their own protocols and how they respond. Is it a human response? Is it a bot response of some sort? But we leave that up to the company. We don't actually provide that service.
Do you have a feeling at this point in time where the role of bots and is this a good thing for consumers and companies?
I think bots are getting to a point where it's reflective on your brand and the customer experience. And I think for some brands, it may make sense. For other brands, they want that human feeling, that human touch. And as a result, they probably don't make sense.
Yeah, I think, again, when my earlier podcast with Dan Gingiss, his point, and I thought was quite spot on, was if you want to talk to a human, you should be able to talk to a human. None of us want to go through that phone tree nightmare anymore. And if it is hey, how many calories are in a Big Mac, that's a bot response. But
yes,
but
it
if
probably doesn't change.
Right. But my Big Mac was cold when I got it at drive-through, that you want a human response for.
Right, or the person at the drive-through wasn't very friendly. Yes,
that might happen.
Yeah, I think what's happening here, to kind of leap a little forward, I think the chief marketing officer is increasingly becoming responsible for the customer experience, the entirety of that customer experience, because he reflects on not only their products but their brand, and their brand perception. And as a result of that, we're increasingly finding customers that are interested, that are being led by their chief marketing officer, their marketing teams, that are getting more into customer care and using social listening in that process.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and it's true. I mean, they are either I kind of see that happening because, let's say the marketer's really good and they're driving lots of customers, lots of sales through the system, and they're getting those customers, and then they're leaving because they had a bad customer experience. That's a problem for the marketer because you come in one door and they're leaving the back door. So they're sort of forced to do it. I do think it's problematic though, because there are systems and technology and other things that are not necessarily that marketer's strength, but that's probably a conversation for a different episode of Renegade Thinkers Tonight. Before we wrap up this segment, I just want to sort of make sure if you what are some of the things that marketers are missing when they're they're approaching a listening program? Is there sort of some common mistakes that they make?
Oh, I think there are. Actually, I did a webinar on this back in May, the 9 mistakes or 9 understandings, basics for social listening. But I think one of the things it's very easy to fall into is what's called false metrics. So, looking at your owned channel, this is all the beautiful new digital content that I'm pushing out, and measuring the engagement and the likes and the forwards and the mentions of that content. To be perfectly honest, that information is totally worthless. But that's what people focus on.
Right.
It's really understanding, looking at your earned or partner channels and understanding what information are they sharing and how are they connecting with you and or your competitors in your industry. And those are where the real nuggets are, and figuring out how do you do real engagement with that.
Interesting. Okay. I'm assuming that webinar is available, sort of recorded, and does it exist on your website somewhere?
It exists on my website.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Then we'll put it in the show notes page on renegadethinkersunite.com. And we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to just keep talking about this social listening. As if any of you have read my book, you know how important listening is in general for marketers. What a huge opportunity social listening represents to the curious CMO. Hey, it's Drew. I was at a conference the other day and somebody looked at my saw lapel pen and said, "What's up with that?" And I said, "Well, what's the one thing that marketing has always had to do? Forget digital, forget all this stuff. What is the one marketing imperative?" And he looked at me and went, "Cut through." And I went, "Yes, ding, 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 ding. That's right. Cut through. That is what marketing must do." And it's not just cutting through the clutter, although that's really important, because if your marketing doesn't cut through the clutter, it's like the proverbial tree in the forest that falls and nobody hears it. But it's also cutting through the crap and the processes that inhibit innovation. We've been working a lot lately with some CMOs to help them cut through the crap and get at the essence of what is their big idea. And how can they make a case to expand that idea across their business? That, to me, is cutting through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Paige Leidick, who is the CMO of NetBase, and we've been talking about social listening in using it for customer care, for finding out if your new products are doing okay. But I know that there's a lot of things that social listening can do that, frankly, you can't get from other channels. And we were talking about during the break a little bit, maybe some stories from the airline business. You want to share one of those stories?
Sure, a couple. There's 2 great stories here. One is with respect to, every airline service provides Wi-Fi on their planes. But understanding the quality of that Wi-Fi, the reach of that Wi-Fi, what the customer experience is, has proven very difficult. Every airline you guys fly sends you a survey afterwards through email that we may or may not respond to or even open. But people do talk about it on social. And so one of our customers was able to actually analyze the social channels and understand that people were complaining about certain level quality of Wi-Fi service on certain model of planes on certain flight routes. And they were able to understand this and correct the problem. Pretty interesting insight, and obviously Wi-Fi service is incredibly important to us busy travelers. Another airline was looking...
But before you get to that one, I just have to sort of comment on it. First of all, how entitled we have become as business travelers, because we used to sort of do this without Wi-Fi. But once we got it, and I think the instruction here is, lots of brands rush to add features, but they often just add the feature and then forget sort of that the quality matters and the customer service component matters. And so all these airlines thought they were doing a good thing by adding Wi-Fi, and then that became the biggest source of complaint. It's sort of ironic, right? And by the way, the only good news about the Wi-Fi going down is that the customer couldn't complain while they were on the plane.
That's right. I mean, how often has that happened to you, where mid-flight the Wi-Fi goes down, but there's no reporting back to the head office that the Wi-Fi stopped working, because on the next flight the Wi-Fi will start working again.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I've had a couple experiences where the Wi-Fi was bad. I landed from the plane. I saved the tweet. I posted it. And I actually heard back from the provider and saying, hey, sorry, you had a bad experience. Here's your refund. Because often you're paying for this service. So, anyway, that's an interesting one, that they were actually able to use this as a way to identify the specific planes. Okay, I get that. Now you had another example.
Another airline where they were looking to, like all of us, we probably have our favorite airline, but there's lots of competition in the airline business. And so people looking to attract either us, more experienced travelers, but also potentially new travelers, and finding out which new capabilities or features or attributes would be important to them, and actually using social to figure that out. Rather than, just coming out with new features and seeing if people like them, actually listening to younger customers, potentially millennials, and figuring out what's going to be most important to them. Is, boarding sequence important? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it, the quality of the snacks? Is it the leg room? Is it the quality of their, preferred traveler program? What are the attributes that are actually going to make a difference to get us to switch?
And so using social, this one airline was able to actually figure all that out?
They were able to figure all this out, and they're actually doing quite well as a result of it.
And so once they have that information, then they can go to this particular target, again, through social and other channels, in order to say, hey, look what we got. It's just like what you wanted.
Not only that, but then they can also measure the engagement of those new features on social as well.
So that's interesting, and I think that's profound to an extent. And I think that my cautionary portion of this is that brands ultimately have to get beyond features. They have to get into the heart of the customer and really to the point that there's brand love, and that person says, I can't really tell you why I love this this product better than the other one. I just do. And that emotional connection is very hard to get through specific features. But that's another conversation for a different day. You had another example you were going to share that was we went from the airlines all the way down to our feet.
Yes, well, not only our feet, but also great example of our stomach before you get to our feet.
Okay, stomach first.
So think about your favorite cranberry juice, right? And think, is cranberry juice, how many of us drink cranberry juice for breakfast? I think cranberry juice has been trying to be number one or number two or even number three for juices at breakfast, and hasn't been very successful. We choose orange juice, number one, apple, number two, and then anything else, number three, right? So how do you differentiate yourself in this market? Well, you change the way you think about who your consumer is. Rather than focusing on a specific meal of the day, you focus on what are the inherent characteristics of your juice. Can it help you with dietary issues? And as a result of that, can it help a certain segment of your audience, potentially women? And so you retarget your brand and your product, which has inherent differentiators, to this new market with huge success. And you do that through understanding how people are drinking your juice, when they're drinking their juice, and why they're drinking their juice. Not because you're trying to compete for a certain meal of the day. And as a result of this, a very well-known brand has introduced a whole line of new products targeted at women who are looking to be fit, focusing on their diets, etc., and they've had significant product growth as a result.
I actually now remember I'm sure it was a NetBase event, and I saw this case history presented, so I can talk about this. It was Ocean Spray, and I remember, because this wasn't confidential and it was a published case history, and it also had to do with the fact that there was sort of a stigma around, a woman walking around with a bottle of cranberry juice, and there was an assumption that, they must have some kind of, female issue. And so, they sort of recognizing that wanted to provide an easy way to give women permission to sort of have a bottle of cranberry juice that didn't scream, yeast infection. So, that I thought was pretty brilliant.
Drew, I'm so glad that you said that and I didn't say that.
Yes, exactly. Well, so a couple of guys here trying to, and what I really liked about that example, and this is a really fundamental one when it comes to new product development, is the women didn't actually say those things, right? It was an unarticulated need. And I think the brilliant marketer is not the one who says, someone wants a faster horse. The brilliant marketer is the one who said, wait, they need a car.
Right.
Right. And to use the Henry Ford example. So anyway, I think that's a really important thing. And any sort of thoughts? So the research is really, it can be cutting edge using social listening.
It is cutting edge. It is cutting edge because social is typically a passionate and emotional response to the experience that the customer is having or the consumer is having with respect to your product or your competitors. It basically is a way of replacing the traditional focus group, but not in that staid environment that we're looking behind the glass, looking at how people are responding to typical questions. This is people actually responding to the experience and expressing themselves, either anonymously or personally.
So this is the death of the focus group.
I think it's the extension of the focus group.
All right. Okay.
Next generation.
Yes. So, okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap things up. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say, marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, as promised, we are back, and my guest is Paige Leidick of NetBase. And I've noticed in this conversation that we've constantly gone back to your customer stories, and I think that says a lot about your approach to marketing. Let's just talk about that in specific in terms of, because we're talking face to face because you're at a customer conference right now. How important is that in the mix to your overall marketing?
It's number one. I mean, when we think about how we engage with our audience, engage with our market, and compete against our other competitors in our space, it's all about differentiating from the words of the customer why they see value in social listening and social analytics, and why they see value in NetBase in solving their real business problems.
And it's funny. I mean, this is not new in B2B marketing, but your customers are your ads. They're your walking testimonials. They are the believable thing. And this comes back to brands aren't believable, but customers are.
Exactly. I mean, a perfect example of this, when I joined NetBase in January of last year, a person on my team came to me and said, we have 72 customers who want to tell their story. And they are ready for us to schedule their video take-ins now. And we said, wow, how many times do you have customers who want to tell your story? Normally we're begging for customers to tell their story. And then once they tell their story, we need to get approval from their PR departments before it can go external. These are customers wanting to tell their story because there's so much value in social listening. But also we then can turn that into our frontline marketing, primarily through digital, and helping them tell their story and its reflection on the power of NetBase.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful sort of circle of love, if you will, because these days, it used to be customers didn't want to share what they were doing, but these days they recognize, well, this is content, and it's better if it comes from somewhere else, and so they see that as a way to build their brand, and of course it certainly helps build yours.
Absolutely, because they want to share, one, because of the power of social listening, but they also, just like you were saying, Drew, they want to share because it shows that they're innovative, and the audience that they're talking to is talking to them on social. So it's a way for them to reaffirm that we're listening.
Right, exactly. And I don't think there's a brand out there that wants to say, hey, we don't care what you have to say, customers, right? So being able to show that you're a good brand that listens and cares about your customers is probably pretty positive.
I would think so.
Yeah. So, interesting. So as we look at 2018 and beyond, what are a couple of the sort of things that you think are going to be, really state of the art for your customers, moving ahead?
Well, I think increasingly focusing, much more on listening. One of the things that we do is that we spend 80% of our program budget, our marketing budget on digital marketing. And increasingly focusing on imagery and video content, less text content. And then, of course, targeting. And I don't think you can target enough. We have a lot of companies will do what we call demographic targeting. But the reality is, if you just do demographic targeting, you'll find out that Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne have the same demographics. So what you really want to do is...
Just a slight dip. They're both Brits.
They're both Brits, born in the same year, both married twice, both with a couple of kids.
All right.
Both English.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Well, so
both with a lot of money.
All right. Well,
yeah.
I'm sure there's some products that we could sell to both of them.
But you want to go, so the reality, some products, yeah, maybe, toiletry products. But probably not even that. I don't know if Ozzy Osbourne does that. But, I think the thing is to go beyond demographics and go into what we call psychographics and actually understanding if people like your brand, what other likes or dislikes do they have and how can you tie that back into re-engaging with them and connecting with them?
So if, we had a group of CMOs and they said, okay, I'm all in on social listening. I get it. I have to do it. It's great for reporting. What's the one surprise for them, in their future? What, for them actually, getting on social and doing some listening themselves?
Well, I think the first surprise they'll realize once they start looking at their earned channel is how few people are talking about them.
And that's kind of sad, isn't it? Yeah. That's sad. No one's talking about us. And your marketing is supposed to be about.
Well, what you'll find out, they're not talking about your brand, but they're talking about categories that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. They're talking about features or functions. Maybe they're talking about other competitors' products, but they're not talking about your brand. And a lot of times when we think about social listening, we want to type in our brand and see how many times it's mentioned.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like Googling yourself. Okay. So.
Do people do that?
Yes, they do. I don't try not to do it more than once a year, but, speaking personally. So let's just, wrap up with what do you think the toughest marketing lesson that you've learned in the last year has been?
Well, I think the toughest thing that I've learned is how quickly marketing is changing and how quickly the customer journey is changing. And where, we used to be able to target people, engage with people, and the process in which they be educated around our brand was pretty, known, right? We could take you through this funnel of education and knowledge and sales cycle and close. and how that's changed so dramatically to the point where people are connecting with you, and they've already done all the research, and all the research has been done online, and the most important people which they've used their research on is from total strangers. They've actually gone to different product review sites and listened to them, and that information is far more valuable than any information that can come from you. And so realizing that we need to connect with those people so they understand what our differentiators are and allow them to be our voice as well.
So I think that's a great place to wrap up. I started this episode by mentioning my man Ben Franklin, you have to work hard to remain stupid. I think that if you come away with one thing from this is that there's a world of opportunity out there if you're just prepared to listen. In a previous episode, CMO success was boiled down to being curious. And if you think about yourself as someone who is infinitely curious about your customer, then not listening suggests otherwise. So one, it's listening. But I think there's an important point that I want to sort of bring to a close here, which is it's not just enough to read the reports of other folks. Particularly a lot of the times it's junior people on the line. One, I encourage you to get out there and listen yourself, like spend a few hours on the customer service, put those headphones on and really have to walk in their shoes. But two, it's not just hearing what they're saying, it's hearing what they're not saying. And those kinds of filters require expertise and experience. And you have that experience. So I think it's important that you add this to your list. I know you have a lot on your list already, but spend some time, particularly as you start to think about a new campaign or product development, because there's a lot of clues out there for you. So, Paige, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks, Drew.
And as always, as listeners of Renegade Thinkers Unite, always appreciate it when you share the show with your friends. You can share it from all the different channels. Feel free to write a review. You can even send me a text at my cell phone, 917-679-8852, and let me know what you think of the show. And then finally, as always, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.